Yes, good morning, Dr. Austin, my fellow classmates. How you all doing today? You're all welcome to my week 3 presentation in which a peer review article will be examined and analyzed to present a health-related issue using an epidemiological approach. My name is Oluduro Olaiwola Gabriel, originally from Nigeria. I'm a corpsman in the Navy, currently stationed in overseas. I'm looking forward to completing my master's in public health so I can get commissioned as a healthcare administration officer in the Navy. That's always been my goal. Now let's go straight to the background of my study. It is well known that common expression of probability have different meaning to different people, and that even quantitative expression can be interpreted differently. This difficulty in communication is compounded by framing, the influence on decision of description of art, contingencies, and outcomes. Patients, students, and physicians were more likely to choose surgery over radiation therapy for treating patients who have lung cancer when the outcome of treatment was framed as the probability of surviving rather than the probability of dying. And this is by Moxie and others, 2003. In the medical decision making, concern with framing has been largely confined to the description of outcome. One aspect of framing has not been well investigated in the impact of different measures of risk. In clinical situation, risk may be summarized using different measures: relative risk or absolute risk, sometimes known as attributable risk, AR. If underlying risk of disease is known, RR can be converted to AR. The two measures are logically equivalent, and in this sense, presentation of either should lead to the same decision. However, the literature on perception of risk suggests this might not be true. Now, let's go to the subject of the study objective, which is my hypothesis. To evaluate this question, we review a research conducted by Malaika and others, 1993, in which the researchers used the epidemiological approach to investigate this health-related issue. In this question-based study, the authors sought to establish whether patient perception of risk were influenced by the presentation of risk in relative versus absolute time. We hypothesize that patients would misinterpret relative risk and not account for underlying risk of disease when comparing it with the measure of absolute risk. Now, going to the population of study, uh, the number of patients were recruited from outpatient practice of an academic general internal medicine group in rural New Hampshire. The group is part of a large multi-specialty practice, and at the time of this study consisted of 12 internists and 4 nurse practitioners or physician assistants seeing a mix of scheduled and unscheduled working patients. A type of studies in a questionnaire-based clinical study of a general medicine outpatient clinic at a rural tertiary care center associated with medical school. Now let's go to my study sample. This test involved a total number of 470 out of 511 consecutive patients who agreed to answer a question while waiting for their clinic visit, as stated by Melankar and others in 1993 in their study. The mean age was 49.1 years, then 62.1% were female and 51.9% had at least 1 year of education beyond high school. Patients respond to the choice of 2 equally efficacious medications for management of hypothetical serious disease. The benefit of one medication was stated in relative terms, while the others in absolute time, indicating indifference to the choice of medication, choose or choose not to answer, as stated by Melaka and others as well in their study. Now, going to the inclusion and exclusion criteria of this study, from August to September 1989, 8.5 days was spent in the designated waiting room in which the scheduled and unscheduled patients who registered were asked to complete a 3-page questionnaire. The only patients who could not read, were visually impaired, or had any physical disability that limited their ability to read or write were excluded. Patients who do not provide response to this questionnaire were eliminated as well, because a written informed consent was required, though a cover letter approved by IRB was attached to each questionnaire stating the intent of the study and that no unique patient identifier will be obtained. There was a different Actually, there was no difference in patient characteristics among who responded to the different version of the form. The first was designed to test the risk of presentation in which the patient were asked to make a choice between taking one of those two medications. The two medications were described as costing the same with almost no side effect. However, the benefit of medication A was presented in relative terms, while the benefit of medication B was presented in absolute terms. The second situation was designed to test the patient understanding in relationship between the relative time and absolute time. The patient were told there was only one medication to treat the disease and its benefit was explained in relative time and then asked to indicate this benefit in absolute time. The statistical method used in this study, all data were entered using SACS FSP with error trapping. Standard chi-squared contingency table was used to test for association between the categorical variables. Odd ratios, OR, with 95% confidence intervals, as described by the Osmar and Lemenshaw using parameter estimate and standard error from the appropriate logistic regression analysis, SAC-PROC-Logis. Now, the result of this study, when asked in the first hypothetical situation to choose the medication to treat their disease, 56.8% of the subjects chose the medication with benefit presented in relative terms, 14.7% chose the medication with benefit presented in absolute terms, while 15.5% were willing to be treated either by the medication and 13% could not even decide. The result was not chance alone because S squared equals 254.3 with 3 DF. Subjects were most likely to choose the medication whose benefit was presented in relative terms, regardless of age, gender, level of education, self-reported health, experience with medical treatment for hypertension or high serum cholesterol, or high serum cholesterol or questionnaire version. In the second hypothetical situation in which the subject were given the underlying risk of dying and the benefit of medication in relative time and asked to indicate in absolute time, 28.2% correctly identified the expected benefit and apparently were able to convert relative into absolute benefit. Patients who are able to equate relative benefit with absolute benefit in second hypothetical situation were more likely to be indifferent to the choice of medication in the first situation, which is OR equals 1.84, 95% confidence interval 1.01 and 3.35. However, like other subjects, more than half of them, which is like 58.1%, still prefer the medication with benefit expressed in relative time in first of hypothetical situation. Now my conclusion based on this study. The overall conclusion of this study is that the majority of the patients faced with it choosing two treatments, one expressed in terms of relative benefit and other in terms of absolute benefit, actually most of them actually choose one frame in relative terms. So my personal opinion, now this is my take. I agree with the conclusion of the author because the statistical test and analysis was accurate based on the calculation. More so, it might be expected that the patient characteristics, especially the level of education, will be associated with the ability to equate relative benefit with absolute benefit. The only noted bias in this study is the size of the sample population, though not so small, but then a sample size of a study is obviously an important part of a good research study. Small sample size can only lead to cases of bias, such as non-response, which occur when more subjects do not have the opportunity to participate in the study. Another limitation of this study is that sequential processing was required to equate relative benefit with absolute benefit. It appears that a conditional frame was generated in which the underlying risk of death was eliminated from the consideration. The majority of the patient was simply have compared to the majority of the patient may simply have compared to relative benefit, that is, it will decrease risk, with absolute benefit, that is, only 8% death prevented per 100 in choosing their answers. The findings of this study are applicable to patients in a clinical settings to compare different measures of risk and investigate why majority of the patients decided to choose relative benefits as opposed to absolute benefit. In conclusion, this study design is ideal for hypothetical. This study design is ideal for hypothesis if the limitation can be corrected in future studies. All right. And my references is from Malanka and others from their study 1993, The Framing Effect of Relative versus Absolute Risk, and Mosey and others 2003, Describing Treatment Effect to Patient, the Journal General Internal Medicine. This has been my presentation, and again, I've been your anchor, Oluduro Olaiwola Gabriel. This is week 3 presentation for COA 606. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Dr. Austin, for being a great instructor. I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.